I hadn't been to my village in years. The city had swallowed me whole with its relentless rhythm, blaring lights, and invisible walls, and yet, a part of me yearned for the simplicity of open fields, quiet mornings, and the familiarity of faces I hadn't seen since childhood. My name is Alex, and the trip I planned was meant to be a short escape, a weekend to recharge, to remember who I was before life became so complicated. As the bus rattled along the dusty road leading to the village, memories began to surface. I could almost feel the warm sun on my face during summer festivals, smell the earthy scent after rain, and hear the distant laughter of children running barefoot along the lanes. Yet, the village felt different now, slower, quieter, as if it had been waiting for me to notice things I had missed. It wasn't long before I caught sight of him. Ethan. He lived on the outskirts of the village, a cowboy whose reputation had traveled even to the city. I had heard whispers from distant cousins and neighbors, strong, quiet, strikingly confident. But nothing prepared me for seeing him in the flesh. He was tall, his build sturdy from years of working the land, and there was an ease in the way he moved that made every simple gesture, lifting hay, feeding horses, adjusting his hat, look effortless. He was the kind of person who seemed carved out of the very landscape, part of the wind that brushed across the fields. Our first interaction was fleeting, almost accidental. I had wandered near the barn to take pictures of the morning light, and he emerged from the stables, hands dusted with straw. He smiled at me briefly, that kind of smile that lingers in memory long after the moment has passed. I felt an unexpected flutter, an unfamiliar pull towards someone I had never really met. I shook my head, telling myself it was nothing, just a stranger, a village resident. But my thoughts betrayed me. In the following hours, I saw him again, twice more. Once, by the river, washing his boots, the sunlight catching the strands of his hair. Once, while tending to his horses, the soft brushing of the animals matching the gentle rhythm of his movements. Each encounter was brief, yet each left me more aware of him, more aware of the curious attraction that had begun to stir inside me. It wasn't just physical, there was something about Ethan's presence that unsettled me, yet felt strangely safe, like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. As I wandered through the village streets that afternoon, I reflected on the growing tension inside me. I had a life in the city, friends, a partner, responsibilities, and yet here, in this quiet place, emotions I had long ignored began surfacing. The city had taught me to compartmentalize, to hide, to plan, but the village had a way of stripping all that away. I felt exposed in the best and worst ways. By evening, I found myself near the old barn again, drawn almost instinctively to the familiar, rustic smell of hay and wood. Ethan was there, alone, adjusting the fence by hand. Our eyes met, and this time, the moment stretched longer. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, each breath shallow and hesitant. He didn't speak, but the air between us carried unspoken words, curiosity, and an unacknowledged tension. I left the barn reluctantly, the memory of that gaze lingering like smoke. I knew something had shifted, though I didn't fully understand what. It was a pull I couldn't rationalize, a quiet promise that my weekend in the village would be more than a mere escape from city life. Something about Ethan had changed the way I saw the village, and perhaps, the way I saw myself. I returned to my temporary lodging that evening, the sky painted with streaks of orange and purple, and realized with a mix of excitement and unease that this trip was no longer just a visit. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, but I knew it would change me.
The following morning, Ethan woke to the faint light of dawn spilling across his bed. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft creaking of the floorboards and the distant sound of the lake lapping against the shore. He lay still for a moment, the memories of the previous day replaying in his mind, Lucas's laughter, the brush of his hand, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke. Ethan felt a strange mixture of anticipation and guilt, emotions that churned in him without warning. Lucas appeared shortly after, carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He moved with a casual grace, offering one to Ethan without a word. "Morning," he said softly, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. The simple gesture sent a shiver down Ethan's spine, the intimacy in such an ordinary act impossible to ignore. "Morning," Ethan replied, voice slightly tight, as he accepted the mug. The warmth from the cup spread through his hands, but it was nothing compared to the heat radiating from being near Lucas. The plan for the day was to hike a nearby trail that led to a hidden waterfall. Lucas suggested they leave early to avoid the heat, and Ethan agreed, silently wondering how they had grown so comfortable around each other in such a short time. The air outside was crisp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine, and the sun was just beginning to climb above the horizon, casting long shadows on the path. As they walked, Lucas fell into his familiar rhythm of teasing, asking Ethan playful questions, nudging him lightly whenever he hesitated. "You know," Lucas said with a grin, "you get nervous about everything. Even choosing which path to take. It's kind of adorable." Ethan's face flushed, but he didn't pull away. There was a magnetic pull he could no longer deny, and though a voice in the back of his mind screamed caution, he found himself leaning into Lucas's presence, drawn by the warmth and confidence he exuded. The trail narrowed as they approached the waterfall, and Lucas slowed, falling into step beside Ethan. The space between them grew smaller, the sound of rushing water filling the silence. "I like moments like this," Lucas said quietly. "No one else around, no distractions, just us." Ethan swallowed, aware of the unspoken meaning behind the words. "Just us," he echoed softly, his voice betraying a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. The phrase lingered in the air, heavy with implication, and for the first time, Ethan wondered what it would mean to truly give in to the pull between them. They reached the waterfall, a cascade of silvery water tumbling into a small pool below. Mist floated in the air, cool and refreshing, settling on Ethan's skin and making him shiver. Lucas dropped his backpack and leaned against a nearby rock, glancing at Ethan with that familiar intensity in his gaze. "You're quiet," Lucas said, tilting his head. "Usually, you have some clever comment or witty response. What's going on in that head of yours?" Ethan looked down at his hands, feeling the heat rising to his cheeks. I don't know," he admitted. "Just thinking, I guess." Lucas moved slightly closer, close enough that Ethan could feel the subtle warmth radiating from him. "Thinking about me?" Lucas teased softly, a note of vulnerability threading through his voice. Ethan's pulse quickened. He wanted to deny it, to insist that he wasn't thinking about Lucas in that way, but the truth pressed uncomfortably close to the surface. He shook his head quickly, attempting a weak laugh. "Not really," he said, though it sounded hollow even to him. Lucas smiled knowingly, not pressing further, but the look in his eyes lingered, making Ethan acutely aware of every brush of their shoulders, every movement that brought them closer. The waterfall roared behind them, masking the sound of their breaths and heartbeats, creating a private space where unspoken tension could build without interruption. They spent the next hour exploring the area around the waterfall, wading into the shallow water, skipping stones, and laughing quietly at each other's clumsiness. The intimacy grew in small, subtle ways, a hand brushing against an arm, a glance held a second too long, laughter shared in a voice that was lower and more personal than usual. Each moment layered upon the last, weaving a tension neither could fully articulate. As the sun climbed higher, Lucas suggested they rest on a flat rock near the water's edge. Ethan hesitated, aware of the closeness that would inevitably follow. Yet he found himself sitting beside Lucas, the sun warming his back and the mist from the waterfall cooling his face. Lucas turned to look at him, his expression unusually serious. "Ethan. I need to say something," he murmured. There was a weight to his voice that made Ethan's stomach twist. "I can't pretend I don't feel this connection. I think about it all the time. About us." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had felt the same pull but had buried it beneath guilt and confusion. Hearing Lucas voice it, however subtly, made it real in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Lucas. I don't know what to say," he admitted, words faltering. "I feel it too. But, it's wrong, isn't it?" Lucas reached out, his fingers brushing Ethan's hand for a fleeting moment before withdrawing, as if testing the boundary without crossing it. "I don't know," he said softly. "All I know is that I can't ignore it. And I don't want to." The air between them felt charged, as if every heartbeat, every breath, carried a weight that neither had experienced before. Ethan struggled to reconcile the excitement with the fear gnawing at him. To act, or even think, on these feelings felt like stepping off a precipice, yet the pull was undeniable, magnetic. Eventually, Lucas rose and extended his hand to Ethan. "Come on," he said with a teasing edge, "we should head back before Mom starts wondering why we're gone so long." Ethan took the hand, feeling the warmth linger longer than it should have. He allowed himself to be led back along the trail, each step heavy with unspoken tension. The boundaries had shifted. The trip was no longer just a family getaway, it had become a crucible where desires, fears, and forbidden feelings mingled, forcing Ethan to confront emotions he had long buried. As they reached the cabin, Ethan paused at the doorway, looking at Lucas with a mixture of apprehension and longing. The day had changed everything. He didn't yet know what the consequences would be, only that there was no returning to the innocence of yesterday, and in that charged silence, with the lake shimmering behind them and the sun beginning its descent, Ethan realized one undeniable truth: nothing about this trip, or his connection with Lucas, would ever be the same again.
The morning sunlight spilled across the fields, golden and warm, but it did little to ease the tension knotting my chest. I walked toward the barn, my steps hesitant, my mind swirling with thoughts I couldn't yet untangle. Ethan was there, as if he had expected me, leaning against the fence, the faint smell of hay and leather around him. His presence, calm yet magnetic, made it impossible to ignore the pull I felt, a pull that had grown stronger with every shared glance and whispered conversation that we didn't speak immediately. Instead, we worked side by side, tending to the animals in silence. Yet, even in quiet, the unspoken words between us were louder than any conversation could be. I could feel Ethan's gaze, steady and unjudging, as though he understood everything I hadn't dared to admit, to anyone, even myself. My heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and something deeper that I had never felt before. Finally, he broke the silence. "Alex, I can see it in your eyes. You're torn," Ethan said, his voice low, carrying a weight of honesty that startled me. "I don't want to complicate things for you, but I can't pretend this isn't real." His words struck me harder than I expected. He wasn't asking anything of me, yet, in that simple acknowledgement, I felt the enormity of the choice before me. Michael, back in the city, represented stability, history, and commitment. Ethan represented something untamed, unexpected, and deeply stirring. My life was balanced on a delicate edge, and one decision could tilt everything that I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "I care about Michael. I love him, in my way. But, being with you feels different. It feels like freedom." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding without judgment. "Freedom isn't about leaving someone behind," he said softly. "It's about knowing yourself. Knowing what you need, even if it scares you." His words resonated in a way I hadn't anticipated. I realized that my feelings for Ethan weren't just about attraction, they were about discovering a side of myself I had long ignored. A side that craved honesty, connection, and passion that couldn't be confined by routine or expectation. The tension that had been gnawing at me for days crystallized into clarity. I had to confront my desires, however uncomfortable that might be. That we spent the rest of the morning in quiet companionship. No declarations, no dramatic gestures, just presence. I watched Ethan carefully repair a fence, and he watched me straighten the barn tools I had been tasked with. Each glance, each smile, each silent moment carried the weight of unspoken understanding. I felt both exhilarated and frightened, aware that the decisions I made in the coming hours could define who I was and what I wanted from love. As the sun dipped lower, I knew it was time to leave. I faced Ethan, my thoughts tangled but my heart more certain than it had been in days. "I need to go back," I said, trying to steady my voice. I need to think. I need to understand what I really want." Ethan nodded, his expression soft but knowing. "Take your time, Alex. Whatever you decide, make it yours." I turned toward the path leading back to the village, each step heavy with contemplation. I realized that this weekend had changed me in ways I couldn't ignore. The village, the quiet fields, the conversations, and Ethan himself had stripped away the armor I had worn in the city. I felt more aware of my heart, my desires, and my limits than I had in years. As the evening sky stretched across the horizon, painted in hues of orange and violet, I understood that life would never feel quite the same. The choice before me remained uncertain, but the journey of self-discovery had already begun. Whatever path I chose, whether back to Michael or towards something new with Ethan, I knew I would never forget the lessons this weekend had taught me, and as I looked back one last time at the barn and the quiet figure standing there, I whispered to myself, some things change you forever, whether you are ready or not.
The next morning, sunlight poured through the cabin windows, painting the wooden floors in warm gold. Ethan awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the faint ripple of water from the lake. He stretched and glanced toward Lucas's room across the hall, noticing the door slightly ajar. Lucas was already awake, moving around quietly, the hum of a song barely audible. Breakfast was a casual affair, scrambled eggs and toast, with Ethan still feeling the lingering tension from the previous night. Lucas, as usual, moved with effortless ease, pouring coffee and teasing Ethan about burning the toast earlier. You always overthink things, Lucas said with a grin. Even breakfast becomes a major operation for you. Ethan offered a small smile, though he couldn't hide the flutter in his chest. Lucas's presence had a way of making ordinary moments feel charged, the smallest gestures carrying weight he wasn't ready to bear. The playful teasing wasn't new, but the undercurrent of attention, the way Lucas lingered just a little too long on certain looks or touches, made everything feel electric. They decided to explore the surrounding woods. Ethan was hesitant at first, unsure of what to expect, but Lucas's easy confidence was contagious. Come on, Lucas urged. You'll love it. Fresh air, quiet trails, perfect for a little adventure. As they walked, the tension between them grew in subtle ways. Lucas pointed out interesting trees, the way sunlight fell through the branches, even the sound of leaves rustling under their feet. He would occasionally brush against Ethan's arm or adjust a stray lock of hair, gestures so casual they could be dismissed, but Ethan couldn't. Every contact made him acutely aware of his own heartbeat. They reached a small clearing where the lake came into view again, sunlight dancing across its surface. Lucas leaned on a large rock, glancing at Ethan. You know, he said, voice low and almost teasing, you're different when you're relaxed. Funny, quiet, more approachable. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't sure whether it was Lucas's words or the way they were said that affected him so profoundly. I don't know, he muttered, averting his gaze. I'm not usually like this with anyone. Lucas's smile softened. That's why I like it, he admitted. You're unpredictable. Makes everything feel interesting. The two spent the next hour skipping stones across the water, laughing, teasing, and sharing small personal anecdotes. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone else, revealing things he usually kept tucked away, his favorite music, an embarrassing story from school, even the rare moments of loneliness he felt living in a blended family. Lucas listened intently, never interrupting, never judging, only drawing him out with gentle prompts and knowing smiles. As the sun climbed higher, Lucas suggested they take a break. He pulled a blanket from his backpack and spread it on the grass, inviting Ethan to sit beside him. The proximity made Ethan's stomach knot, every brush of his arm against Lucas sending warmth through his body. He wanted to pull away, to remind himself of boundaries, yet he stayed, mesmerized by the easy confidence Lucas exuded, the way he seemed to fill the space effortlessly. Ethan, Lucas said quietly, leaning back on his hands, do you ever feel like we're missing something? Or that life is just a series of things we pretend we don't notice? Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. The question wasn't casual, it carried weight, something deeper, almost confessional. Sometimes, he admitted. I don't know. I think I notice things I shouldn't sometimes. Lucas's gaze lingered on him. Me too, he said softly. There was a pause, the kind that stretched long enough to make Ethan painfully aware of the space between them, not physically, but emotionally. It was charged with curiosity, longing, and something he couldn't name. They spoke little after that, each lost in thought as the sun began its slow descent. Ethan noticed the way Lucas's profile caught the light, the subtle way his hand rested near his own, the occasional twitch of a smile that seemed meant for him alone. He tried to focus on the beauty of the lake, the tranquility of the trees, but the undercurrent between them was impossible to ignore. Later, they returned to the cabin, damp and tired, yet strangely elated. Lucas immediately suggested preparing dinner together, turning it into a playful competition. As they chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, Ethan found himself laughing freely, feeling more alive than he had in months. Lucas's presence was intoxicating, but there was also a quiet tension, an awareness that every shared glance or touch carried implications neither dared speak aloud. When night fell again, the cabin felt smaller, warmer, more intimate. Ethan found himself sitting on the porch, the cool air brushing against his skin, thinking about the day. Lucas joined him without a word, sliding onto the bench beside him. There was a closeness that felt natural yet forbidden, the kind that made Ethan's pulse quicken despite his best efforts to remain composed. Lucas didn't speak at first, just leaned back, eyes scanning the lake as if reading its secrets. Then, softly, he said, "You know, I've never felt this, connected to anyone before. Not even close." Ethan swallowed, aware of the rapid thrum of his heartbeat. He wanted to respond, to express the swirl of emotions he couldn't yet name, but words failed him. Instead, he simply nodded, allowing the silence to stretch between them, filled with unspoken understanding. For a long time, they watched the water, the moonlight shimmering like fractured glass. Ethan realized, with an undeniable clarity, that he was no longer thinking of Lucas as just a stepbrother. That realization was both thrilling and terrifying. His thoughts were messy, conflicted, yet there was a magnetic pull he couldn't resist. Finally, Lucas spoke again, voice low, almost a whisper. "Whatever happens here, let's just see where it goes, okay?" Ethan's stomach twisted. The words were open-ended, charged with promise and danger, hinting at possibilities he wasn't sure he was ready to explore, but couldn't deny he wanted to. He nodded again, though his mind was racing, his heart caught somewhere between anticipation and fear. As they retreated to their separate rooms for the night, Ethan lay awake, thinking about Lucas's words, the touch of his hand during the day, the way his laughter lingered in his ears. He realized that the trip, which had begun as a simple getaway, had already shifted something fundamental. Something unspoken had begun, something neither of them could ignore, and somewhere in the quiet, Ethan understood that nothing would ever be the same again.